All right, welcome everyone. Thanks for tuning in wherever you may be listening from across the Aloha State. Excited to be here for another episode. Paul, how's it going?
Yeah, things are going good. Excited to bring this episode to our listeners.
Great. Yeah, so we'll just jump right in. We're excited. We're going to talk about FIRE today, financial independence, retire early, and we'll get around to some other stuff as well. And we got a special guest on to talk about this, and his name is Cody Garrett. He's what I would call a subject matter expert. I don't know if he would claim the same, but we're super excited to have him here. And with that, Cody, if you want to just tell our listeners a little bit about who you are, where you came from, what you do, and anything you're willing to share.
Absolutely. So I'm from the mainland. I'm from Texas. Very different environment than the Aloha State. I did. If you can't see on the podcast, I'm wearing a blue shirt like the ocean. It's the closest I can get to a Hawaiian shirt. And I'm the type of person who says Hawaii rather than Hawaii. So I'm learning. I know Paul's teaching me how to say the things correctly. And I've been to Hawaii once. It was a lot of fun, except for the part I got sick. But again, that's out of my control. But yeah, I do consider myself an expert on the topic of today, which is financial independence, retire early, also known as FIRE. So really excited to dig into the topic and also a lot of the misconceptions around this area.
That's awesome. And so thanks so much, Cody, for being here. So we're talking about FIRE, financial independence, retire early. So, what is that? Like, just in basic terms, like, what does that look like in your mind, and how do you help clients understand what that looks like for them?
If you were to redefine it, you think of financial independence as being work optional, which means it doesn't mean you stop working, right? It's that you have the ability to work because you want to, not because you have to. I think most of us, if we stopped working for even a week, sometimes a month, it would be very difficult to maintain our desired lifestyle and meet our financial cash flow needs. So financial independence is getting to that point where you have a lot more flexibility on the who, what, where, when, and why, and how of how you spend your time, energy, and financial resources. So if you're listening to this, and even traditional retirement might feel like a long time away. Effectively, financial independence is the ability to retire if you want to, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you stop working. I know a lot of the listeners probably really enjoy the work that they do, especially in public service. You're giving back, you're helping the helpers. There's a lot of purpose and passion behind the work you do, but just imagine to yourself, what would it feel like if I could continue to do the work that I do, but without having to rely on the paycheck? That's really what I think financial independence looks like.
Right. And I mean, a lot of people would say, and maybe not a lot of people, but, they would focus on that. Hey, I want to retire early. But I love that you said, it's really, the FI part about it is it's just creating options. It's creating that ability to make it optional, or make it more of a passion project versus a have to. Yeah, I love that. And to be honest, something like that, that's something that I would strive for as well. So this is really cool to be able to have this. So, just thinking about, what types of ways, or what are different forms of FIRE? So what you say, I'm not sure if that makes sense, but what are some different forms of FIRE today?
Yeah, so there seem to be, within the FIRE community, it's a very community-based thing. I know, think about Hawaii, right? There's a lot of culture and community. There's the same thing in this, they call it the FIRE movement, right? Or the FIRE community, that they've kind of developed what they call the flavors of FIRE, right? So we talked a little bit about what regular FIRE is: financial independence, retire early. That's the ability to work because you want to, not because you have to. But traditional FIRE is that you do actually stop working, right? You stop working, and by early retirement, some people want me to be like, oh, well, what is early? To me, early really means, if you think about pre-Medicare, so pre-age 65, right? Pre-age 65, Social Security, some of those traditional retirement type of things, RMDs, required minimum distributions. So if you're going to retire before 65, that's kind of what I consider early retirement. That's kind of the traditional FIRE, is you stop working before 65 and you have enough money and other income sources, such as your public pension, right? To maintain your desired lifestyle expenses. But there's also things like fat FIRE, which is a funny term, fat FIRE and lean FIRE, which really, fat FIRE is for people who retire early, but have enough income sources and a big enough investment portfolio that they can spend typically more than $100,000 a year. right? Which a lot of us, based on where I live, I live in a very low cost living. $100,000 a year would be, a lot of money to spend. We spend about $60,000 a year. So, it would be fat FIRE, the expanded FIRE, if we were spending over 100,000. Lean FIRE is kind of the opposite. People who retire and have, they've been frugal a long time and they're used to that lifestyle, low cost of living, and they want to spend maybe like 40,000 or less a year. And then there's two other flavors that aren't really related to how much you're spending, but really the flexibility of how you're spending your time. One is called Coast FIRE. The way this works is you continue to work, but you only work enough to maintain your living expenses, but you're not working and saving additional money. So let's say that somebody's making, let's say $80,000 a year, and they get to a point where they're Coast FIRE. This means that they can continue to work at their main job, but the money that they were putting toward their investments, they're saving, they can now spend. But yet they still have enough money that to retire at whatever age they like, and then continue to maintain that lifestyle. So Coast is that really good feeling of work optional, and it gives you permission to spend even while you're still working, right? To spend more of your money rather than save and invest, because you're already done doing the saving and investing part. And then lastly is Barista FIRE. The reason this is called Barista FIRE is think about the barista at the coffee shop. This is somebody who they have enough money to retire, but they still want to do something like some part-time work, such as be a barista. And some of that part-time work also might provide something like health benefits, right? Health insurance and early retirement. It's a big deal and something that people are concerned about. So you can see that there's a lot of flavors on how much you spend, but also the flexibility of what I call financial independence, recreational employment. So you talk about FIREs, financial independence, retire early, but I've made up this meme of financial independence, recreational employment, which is actually what I would do. Even if I had all the money in the world, I would still want to work, because I find a lot of fulfillment in work. It creates an impact. It helps people beyond just doing something beyond myself. So I just encourage anybody, create your own flavor. You don't have to go by any of these labels, but those are some examples of what FIRE looks like.
I mean, that's so good. Like recreational employment. Like, I mean, to me, like I feel like, there are so many different ways to, is what I'm learning is there's so many different ways to do this. I guess for me, I always thought like, be a minimalist, have very low expenses, and then just, live off of whatever you can to just have that basic small number, right? 40,000 covered, which in Hawaii just seems almost impossible. Like fat FIRE is almost like a normal FIRE here,
Right.
So yeah, with that, I mean, Jason, do you anything to add there or thoughts on what we're talking about?
No, I really like what you said about find your own flavor, right? I think a lot of people, they hear these words and think, okay, this is what I'm going to do. I'm going to do lean FIRE. And it's like, you can create your own FIRE. If FIRE is your interest, right? You can create the FIRE that works best for you.
Yeah. And really with that FIRE, a lot of people they make assumptions about the types of things you enjoy spending money on. So a lot of people within the FIRE community, they talk about how travel is really important to them, and experiences with family and traveling around the world, retiring early and traveling all over the place. Like that is not my definition. Like I'm a homebody. Like I don't really enjoy like not long flights. I enjoy the destination much more than the journey as well, right? So it also makes you think that, I think one thing, Paul, you mentioned is a lot of things at times we think about like on the path to FIRE, meaning that you spend very little, you kind of just like barely get by and you save everything. But in reality, it's really, one of the philosophies is the alignment of spending money in alignment with what provides unique value to you and your family. So for example, there are people on the path to early retirement who still buy new cars, right? You think, oh, well, if somebody's on the path to early retirement, like they're probably like, wouldn't they just like buy a 10-year-old car and like drive it till the wheels fall off, right? And like, only own one surfboard their whole life, right? But in the reality, like you can get to a place of early retirement with some intention, while also aligning your spending even along the way in alignment with your values, even if it means spending a little bit more on those things. Again, thinking about quality over quantity in your spending. So give yourself permission, to continue maybe that $5 coffee or that spam musubi, right? Like that special treat that you like, right? Or the shaved ice, right? Like it doesn't mean that you have to stop buying those things just, for the uncertain future of possibly being work optional when you're in your 60s and 70s and 80s.
Yeah, no, I mean, I feel like what you said was spot on. Like, so many of us think like, we're not going to be able to save enough. How would this ever be possible? And to be honest, like, I don't look at conversations with my own clients. I talk about those values types of things, like making your money, resemble your values, right? Or like, produce values that you have versus just spending on whatever. But it's really interesting how you connect that. And one of the things that I was learning about as I was preparing for this episode was like, how much would someone need to save? Like, I've heard different numbers, and I've heard different things, like, how much would you need to earn to do this? Or, so when we're thinking about like in that accumulation time, in your working time, when you're trying to get that to FIRE, what are some things to think about when we talk about like building up that nest egg or building up that things, or how would someone do that?
Yeah, the first thing is, if you're listening, if you're the type of person who, you have, that you still have money at the end, right? So you pay your bills and there's still money left, right? That could mean one of two things. And I want everybody to listening and watching to think about this is, do I spend less than I make, or do I make more than I spend? Because those sound the same. I mean, you can think about them similarly, but spending less than you make is just about having the intention of living beneath your means, or some people say below your means. It's just saying, and also not just paying your bills and saving what's left, but actually flipping it around and saying, how can I save first? How can I invest in myself? How can I invest in my future self? Right. So if you think about it, debt, the difference between debt and investing, with debt, you're paying for current expenses in the future, right? But with investing, right, you're pushing current income into the future to pay future expenses. So it's kind of, if you think about it, if you're the type of person who might be kind of trying to get rid of your debt, or you finally out of debt, investing is kind of on the opposite side of that. Is you're actually giving a gift to your future self. Every time you save and invest, your future self is thanking you, not just for the money, but also the experiences and the alignment of the values that your future self is going to be able to achieve and really feel and experience in the future. And you talked about like, how do people know like how much to save maybe, or like how to know if they're on track. So once you're spending less than you make and saving and investing the rest, first of all, it's really important that you're not just saving, but you're investing, right? So just opening an account and putting money and putting cash in is probably not going to get you there very quickly. So this is a good reminder that if you are, I mean, we're not going to give any investment advice here, but if you're contributing to these accounts, make sure that those accounts, that money is actually invested in alignment with your time horizon, whether it's 10, 20, 30 years from now, because you want to take advantage of the growth within the accounts. In the FIRE community, they often say that you want 25 times your annual expenses in retirement. But I will quickly say that's a misconception, because the 25 times rule it forgets about all the other income sources in retirement, such as Social Security or public-private pensions. Some listening to this, if you have a public pension, you might not be paying to Social Security. So, it might be important to understand some of the education around. Have you talked about some of those things before? The windfall elimination provisions, some of the kind of the ways that Social Security and public pensions can interact with each other?
Not a whole lot, but I mean, that's coming in future episodes for sure. It's really important to touch on.
Yeah, and something that I point out too, just so our listeners understand as well. So state of Hawaii is one of those states that those people are paying into both Social Security and to the public pension. So in the event, most of them or all of them that call Hawaii home wouldn't have to worry about some of those things. Sure. But we are going to get to those topics because there are definitely people who have those situations too.
Fantastic. So keep listening. But yeah, I think that's actually a good thing when you're paying into both. So you don't have to worry about that. But with that said, right, let's say you have like public or private pensions, you also have Social Security. That doesn't mean all of your retirement income is going to have to come from your own investment portfolio that you control. So rather than doing like a 25 times income type of heuristic or rule of thumb, I think it's better to either work with a financial planner or financial professional, or even do some of your own projections there's some financial planning tools. One is newretirement.com. I'm not affiliated at all, but that's a way that you can kind of project some of those the income and expense sources over time. Because anytime you have different timing, for example, like your pension will start at a different time than your Social Security, and so since when you have variable income sources like that, it's better to use some type of software to project that rather than using a rule of thumb. But a good rule of thumb generally, right, is to spend less than you make, right?
Sure.
Right. And make sure that when you are investing, that you are saving, that you're actually investing. And I know some of the rules of thumb can say save like 10, 15, 20% of your income. But I think it's better to kind of flip it around and say, okay, like what does my desired lifestyle look like? Maybe there are some alternate ways to gain the same value from those expenses with reduced cost or even eliminating. I know in Hawaii, there's a lot of things you can do for free, right? There's a lot of things, especially outside, that you can do for free or cheaply. So I would say, just be more intentional about how you do spend your money, save and invest the rest. And you'll not that you're going to compare yourself to others, but you will be better off than you were before.
Yeah. Wow. Jason, thoughts?
No, I'm glad you, the whole time I was thinking of the word intentional, right? Like, and don't focus so much on your earn as much as your burn. And not to say you can't spend money, but it's just being intentional with that spending. I think that's I think a lot of people get caught up on focusing on how much they earn. And it's this hamster wheel of I need to earn more and earn more and earn more without taking care of those, investments and focusing on their burn.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Cool.
I mean, so for me, I mean, I just loved how you said, do I spend less than I make, or do I make more than I spend? And like, and when you first said that, I was like, well, that's the same thing. But as you explained it, I mean, to me, it's like a mindset shift, right? It's like, it's understanding like, no, I'm deliberately choosing and intentional, right? Like you said, Jason, to spend less than I make versus, oh, I'm out earning my spending, which it's really hard to continue to out earn spending. But yeah, but it's so interesting because a lot of these conversations, I feel like whether you want to go for FIRE or not, these are really important things to think about, because, you're going to get to that retirement age at some point in time. And hopefully you've done enough, whether it's for early retirement or for just regular retirement. These are all things that are, to me, super helpful. So let's move into that. Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, just a quick thing to add. I want to tell people that statistics are really interesting. Again, you never know what to actually, which statistics to actually, listen to, because there's a lot of noise out there. But I will say that about 70% of Americans retire before age 65. And I just want to mention that it's not just people retiring because they want to. You need to remember that retirement can often be involuntary.
Right.
Right. So I think a lot of us are saying like, oh, I plan to retire when I'm 65. Like, that's a nice thought, a nice goal, an objective, but there are a lot of variables within the retirement formula that are out of our control. Right. So for example, if you're listening, you might have been a caregiver for somebody in your family, right? Whether older or younger than you. Even in retirement, you might be a caregiver for even your own spouse, your partner, your parents, your kids, right? So I think it's important to make an intentional plan, but also plan for the things, or at least make some conservative assumptions for the things that are out of your control. So one reason that I save, one reason that I spend less than I make, and I save and invest the difference, is because there's an uncertain future of not just when I retire, but how will my physical, mental, spiritual, relational wellness, how will those stay in place and be healthy, not just in retirement, but also on the path to retirement. So think long-term, be intentional, but also be kind and compassionate to yourself along the way, because most of these variables are out of our control. So just, pick a handful of the things you can control and be intentional with those things. And I think you'll be well on your way to FIRE.
Wow. I mean, geez, we could have a whole episode, I feel like, just right there on just digging deeper there. Unfortunately, we'll put a pin in that, maybe talk about it deeper another time, but wow. I mean, honestly, that was so good. And totally agree. So with that, let's kind of just turn the page to what it might look like. Hey, I've made it. I'm FIRE, right? What is decumulation? What is this on the tail end, right? So now we've accumulated enough. Now we're starting to spend, or we're decumulating. And what type of planning is involved in that? What does that maybe look like for you when you help your clients?
Yeah. So maybe I'll come up with the biggest concerns. So the biggest concerns or reason people think they can't retire yet, even if they have enough money, is first of all, taking money out of their accounts. So they're like, I've saved into all these tax advantage accounts through my employer. I might have had like a 401k, a 403b, some pensions that I have the option of like taking a lump sum or the pension, options like that. So they're saying, okay, if they retire before 59 and a half, that's a really unique number in our in our profession, which it sounds a little goofy, like why 59.5? Again, I didn't make the rules, but
Yeah.
before age 59.5, sometimes you can be dealing with what's called a 10% additional tax. Some people call it the tax penalty, which is, the US government wants you to, the money you're saving for retirement, they want to make sure you're actually using it in retirement and not just like taking it out along the way. So there's a 10% early withdrawal penalty before age 59.5, unless some other exceptions apply. So one of the things I help clients do in financial planning, I mean, I'm not accepting any new clients, just letting you know kind of how I do things, is, a lot of my work is helping clients who retire before age 59.5 get access to that money without the 10% penalty. So there's a few things if you'd like to go a little bit deeper on some of those strategies. Second, this is probably the biggest thing people are concerned about, is the cost of health coverage in early retirement, right? So before Medicare, or if I don't have access to any continuing health coverage through my employer or through my pension, they're wondering, okay, I've heard that health insurance is really expensive. They call it the Affordable Care Act, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be affordable for you.
Right.
So it's really important to understand there's about 7 or 8 ways to get access to health coverage in early retirement. But the biggest one, probably like 95% of early retirees, they actually go to healthcare.gov /C-plans, really to look at the cost of the public health insurance marketplace, but it's based on zip code. So does Hawaii have their own healthcare marketplace?
Yep. Yeah, they do.
Cool.
Yeah.
Cool, right. So if you go to healthcare.gov /C-plans and you just type in your zip code, it'll transfer you automatically to the Hawaii's health coverage, the health marketplace for Hawaii. So it is expensive. I will tell you, on the base, the plans can be very expensive, especially if you have like multiple members of your family. With that said, there are also things called premium tax credits available based on your modified adjusted gross income. That sounds very technical, but to back up, it just says the less you make in early retirement, and by make, I mean the less taxable forms of taxable income you have in early retirement, the more higher health subsidies you can get. So I work with a lot of early retirees who maybe they even have $1 million in early retirement, but because they have a lot of control over their forms of taxable income, and maybe they haven't pulled a trigger on their pension yet, and they're just taking money out of their investment accounts. If they've been intentional with the types of accounts they're putting their money into, when taking money back out, they can have a lot of control. And I've worked with families who are getting $30,000 a year in healthcare subsidies just because they've been intentional. That word intentional, they've been intentional. I call it beginning with an end in mind. If anybody's familiar with, there's a book, Stephen Covey's 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. It talks about beginning with an end in mind. So what I tell people is it's never too early to plan for retirement. So even if you're just got your first job out of college, right, or you're in their 30s and 40s, you might be like, oh, like retirement, I'll think about that later. Like, your future retiree version of yourself will thank you for starting to think about this now, because how you contribute today will affect how you distribute in retirement. So definitely the order of operations for how you take money out of your accounts, and then also controlling those forms of taxable income so that your health coverage isn't completely out the window in terms of the biggest part of your expense.
Yeah. And honestly, by the time this episode will come out, we just talked about diversification and tax location, right? So
awesome.
All these different things to basically help them understand, like, yes, just because we have, this account or that account, how do they all work with each other, and being intentional for that. Yeah. I mean, I would like to go a little bit deeper on maybe just a few other things, like maybe like, I know there's probably a bunch, but maybe like 2 or 3 other things that are like, these are common things that are concerns for people when they're in that early retirement phase. Like, so medical insurance is one of them for sure. Taking money out, like that's always like, I've been putting money in this whole time, now I got to take money out. What is that? So like maybe only 1 or 2, like what are some other thoughts about some fears or some of the things like that to make that jump into early retirement?
So one thing that's it's really important and non-technical, I mentioned earlier, your physical, mental, spiritual, relational, financial wellness are interrelated. So the biggest thing that I see is people who they spend a few decades like on the path to early retirement. And then when they get close to retirement, they're really focused on what they're retiring from, but they haven't thought about what they're retiring to. Or they're thinking about retirement, but they're only thinking about the financial aspect of retirement, right? That's why they reach out to me. They're like, let's look at the spreadsheet again. They've looked at the spreadsheet over and over again to see if it works. But they're forgetting about, okay, what does my physical, mental, spiritual, relational wellness look like, right? So besides all the technical stuff that, again, you can figure that out. You can work with a professional, you can learn it yourself, but really focusing on your relationships, focusing on like not losing your, if you're into like any type of spiritual practice, like don't let those things sit on the back burner so long that by the time you get to retirement, this is really what happens. People get to early retirement. They have all the money they could ever want to, you know, meet their desired lifestyle needs. But they have all this money in their hand. They turn around and their physical health, their mental health, their relationships, their spiritual practices, like they kind of just drop the ball on those. And if you imagine if you retired, and most people say as soon as they retire, they call them the go-go years. There's the go-go, the slow-go, and the no-go years. And the go-go years are like, oh, we want to travel the world. We want to go on Viking cruises. We want to go to every island of Hawaii, like in 1 year. We want to have, you know, a lot of fun. But yet they haven't been taking care of their physical body or their mental or their mind, right? So they have all this money, but they don't have actually like the physical mental capacity to actually do the things that they've been saving decades to do. Like that is much more sad to me than having, you know, not quite having enough money, you know, to get dessert at a restaurant, right? Like it's really going back to say, not just what do I want to spend my money on, but what do I want myself to look like, you know, physically, mentally. I personally, in terms of vulnerability, I go to counseling weekly. I spend $500 a month to see a mental health counselor. I spend $500 a month on a business coach. But it's not just about the money, right? It's about just taking care of myself, because why save for a future where I'm not going to be healthy enough to actually enjoy all that stuff I've saved for?
Wow. That makes me think about an earlier podcast that we had too with Kaipo Kroll talking about retirement insights and just really taking, you know, understanding like it's not just about the money. There's so many soft parts of this that are equally, or in some cases more important than the actual dollars, for sure. But yeah, Jason, I'm gonna throw it over to you. Just love to hear some thoughts or things that are going on in your mind.
No, I think that's super important. I like everything we're talking about, and I think people do get, you know, wrapped up in the spreadsheets and kind of lose track of everything else. No, it's all great stuff. I was thinking of making a pivot here and maybe talking about keeping it local. Cody, what are your thoughts on you know, trying to achieve FIRE in these high cost of living areas like Hawaii? And in Hawaii also, I mean, unfortunately there's a housing shortage, you know, real estate is going through the roof. And I'm sure with a lot of people you've interacted with, and I hope this isn't the case for our listeners here, you see a lot of people probably move from a high cost of living area to a low cost as a means to achieve FIRE. I don't know if that's something you've seen, and I hope that doesn't happen to any of our listeners. But being in a high cost of living area, is it just a matter of scaling the numbers up, or is there anything to consider there?
Yeah, I think that when, you know, the things I know about Hawaii when I went there, you know, definitely the cost of housing. So if you think about like your you know, the biggest things on your budget, right? Your housing, your transportation, taxes, right? Actually, even right there, right? So sometimes if you're working in a state like Hawaii with state income tax, right? You might be thinking even more so about like some of those tax deferral options of making traditional pre-tax contributions to retirement accounts. Not that that's the way everybody should do it, but I'm thinking about ways that, you know, the more income you make, the more you should be looking at opportunities to defer that income into the future. Not just saving federal income tax, but also on state income tax. In terms of housing, that can be tough, right? Some people, they might stay in a high cost of living area on the path to early retirement, but they might share housing, or they might buy you know, a dual, like, or a family unit. They might buy a duplex, and some people even rent out. I know in Hawaii, there's a lot of people who rent out like part of their home, or maybe they have like, you know, one home on this side of the street and the other half on the other side of the street, and they rent it out to tourists. I know that there's a lot of money to be made in tourism. It's probably also, there's a lot of demand, and I don't know if the supply is there at this point for that, but I think it's thinking creatively about ways to reduce the expenses on your biggest things, right? So if your housing and transportation is taking up, you know, 80% of your budget, like it's probably, you it's probably worth considering, like, are there alternatives there? I know in terms of community, I'm sure in terms of Hawaii, are there a lot of families living together in terms of like, multi-generational family situations?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's definitely a lot of that. There's a lot of investors buying real estate for rental income, but it's kind of to the detriment of some of the first time home buyers and people trying to break into that housing market. So the housing market here, I wouldn't say it's unique. It's probably similar to, your New York Cities, your San Franciscos, and just the high cost of living areas in a lot of ways.
Yeah, I do say, I mean, a lot of people think about real estate. They have this debate on, is it an investment or not? I've always said that your housing is a lifestyle decision first. A house is a lifestyle decision, not an investment. Yes, it might appreciate in value or depreciate in value, right? But you choose where you want to live based on your desired lifestyle as a family. And you said earlier, getting out of the spreadsheets. I think it is important to know your numbers. Like, it is important to understand how much you're spending on housing. But one of the heuristics I talk about, or just the frameworks I talk about, is a lot of us, we try to fit our life into the numbers rather than fitting the numbers into our life. So I think if you're, by listening to this, think about negotiating top down rather than bottom up. And what I mean by that is, like, pretend for just 1 week, right? Imagine you have a blank 7-day calendar, 24-hour-a-day calendar, and you have all the money you could ever need, and you have no commitments to a job. Fill out that calendar. I know, Paul's like, oh, that felt good just to think about. Right? Imagine filling out this blank calendar of how do you want to spend that week together as a family. So write down about what types of things would you be doing, where would you be going, like, where are you going out to eat, are you cooking at home, like, talk about how do you want to spend time as a family. And then what's cool is, now that you kind of design this desired lifestyle without money, without work being a part of the plan, now you can kind of like lay over the reality of work and money on top of that. You can say, okay, what I find is that a lot of people, they try to fit their family into their work calendar, right? Than trying to fit their work into their family calendar, right? And not necessarily that you can just, like, not everybody can negotiate, like, their hours at work, but just having the mindset of saying, I'm going from the top down, I'm going to design our ideal lifestyle as a family, have these conversations as a family. And then only at that point am I going to place restrictions on myself. So don't just look at the bank account and say, okay, what can I do with the money there? Dream big, and then only from there step down. And I think some people might say, like, that's kind of dangerous. Like, why would I dream of this, like, huge, extravagant, because your desired lifestyle, by the way, could be expensive, right? Sure. You'd say, well, why would you even let me dream? And the reason I tell you to dream is that if you let your money dictate your life, again, it's that place where you're going to look back in retirement. You're going to look back and be like, wow, like, I wish that I didn't have to wait till retirement to finally have the desired lifestyle I want. And I've met people, I mean, not necessarily in Hawaii, but I've met people who as a household, even with multiple kids, make $40,000, $50,000, right? Like with more joy, like more passionate about just, and more having greater alignment of their family's unique values and desired outcomes in alignment with their spending than I do with people who are making $1 million. They're stressed all the time. They have all the money in the world, but they don't have. But they're not thinking about. Again, they've designed their life around their money rather than designing their life and then saying, how can I plug the money in? So the last thing to say on that is, when you're thinking about a high cost of living area, I would never tell somebody to leave a high cost of living area to a low cost of living area. Not just like, do not move just for taxes, right? Even if your income taxes are going to be lower somewhere else, they're going to hit you with something else, whether it's property taxes, state, like, you're going to pay your taxes no matter where you go. But lastly there, if the only reason I tell somebody to move from a high cost of living to a low cost of living is if they've actually explored all those other options of how they could live, how they could maybe share a place, maybe rent, again, share rent, have a roommate, right? Some people would rather have 3 roommates and still live in Hawaii than move to some, like, podunk town in the middle of the US and have none, like, where none of their family lives, none of their friends live, right? So yeah, don't eliminate your family and friends and your desired lifestyle first. Like design your life around that and then plug in the numbers and see what works.
Yeah. So Cody, I feel so Hawaii, there's a ninth island, and it's called Las Vegas. And so everybody in Hawaii, that's our ninth island. And you see, that's the number one destination for people to travel and visit. The people in Hawaii, they like to go gamble and have fun, but then also people actually move. All their aunties and uncles are going to go visit them in Vegas and enjoy it. So that's the preferred destination to move.
Can you get like 2 houses for the price of one practically when you move to Nevada?
Sure,
Yeah. Yeah. No, I mean, it's totally true. Vegas, Pacific Northwest up there. But I mean, so to me, like, just so our listeners, like, so much of what Cody's saying hopefully is resonating, because to me, like, whether FIRE is your objective or just retiring with health, with family on your mind and things like that, there's so much like good things to chew on there, because so many of us would say family is super important, right? But when you actually audit your calendar, you audit some of these things maybe you're spending, you're like, oh, is family actually the number one thing? And I just love what you said there. It's just like integrating your family into your work is not the way to do it. It's just really just integrating your work into your life, right? And I just love that mindset shift. And so, I know we can probably talk quite a bit on a bunch of different things, but one of the things that maybe we'll end with, and again, we can keep going, but just curious because, I know that you're not accepting new clients, and that's not really why you're here. I just love your heart to just share. But, just thinking about like DIYers, right? So do-it-yourselfers. I know that's primarily like who you work with as they are on that road to FIRE. And then, just maybe why does it seem like most of these people who are FIRE are do-it-yourselfers? And then maybe some thought process on why some people would prefer to delegate some of this stuff away to other people. Just curious on your thoughts and what you see in your practice.
Yeah, so I think, in terms of intentionality, as we talked about, like that's one of the core things of this FIRE movement. Intentionality also means being frugal, typically. You have to be careful about the thin line between being cheap and frugal, right? And cheap usually means that it hurts somebody else, not just you, right? Versus frugal is just kind of like you're sacrificing something for yourself. But in terms of that frugality, a lot of people on the path to financial independence, they'd rather spend their time than their money. Right. So if they're trying to save and invest a lot of money, that means they're spending less money, but that means they're investing more of their time in terms of becoming educated. Sometimes I've met people who are not financial advisors who know more than financial advisors just because they've gone so deep into the weeds of their own education. I like what you said about DIY investors, as we call them do-it-yourself investors, but just because you're a do-it-yourself investor doesn't mean you have to do it alone. And with that said, we even say do-it-yourself investor, right? Investing is only one of like the 25 topic areas that I cover in financial planning, right? Choosing investments, like making trades on your investments, like that's just a very small part. Thankfully, we spent most of this time talking about the other things, not not choosing the best mutual funds and all those things, right? But yeah, even if you feel like you have what I call the time, the temperament, and talent to manage your own investment, your trades, right, and your investment management, that doesn't mean, first of all, it doesn't mean that's the only part of financial planning. There are about 25 other topic areas that I've identified. We can maybe put maybe a list of those in the show notes if you have room for them. Sure. But also, so sometimes it's worth spending not just your time, but some money getting personalized guidance, right? So the difference between just going to Google and typing in your financial questions versus like hiring a financial planner or financial advisor is that when you type, Google and all these AI tools, right? They're really good at answering your questions, but they're not good at making sure you're asking yourself the right questions.
Yeah.
Right. So I think that the highest and best use of a financial planner and hiring a financial planner is to go beyond the general education and really understand which elements of this education actually apply to my personal situation. I'll kind of end here on what financial planning is. This is perfect for the islands of Hawaii, right? Imagine you have 2 islands, right? One island is your comprehensive financial ecosystem, right? Everything in your life with a number on it. There's another island that is your family's unique values and desired outcomes. The financial plan is the bridge or the boat ride or the ferry ride between those two things, right? So your island is not your financial plan, right? Your values is not your financial plan. Your money isn't your financial plan. The plan is the connection between those two things. So not until you align all parts of everything in your life with a number on it with what really matters to you and your family, do you actually have a financial plan. So whether it's learning on your own, hiring a financial planner, those are great ways. I just want everybody to, this is a challenge for everybody listening, within the next year, I want you to be able to say, yes, we have a bridge between our money and our life. And we've been intentionally building that bridge and now implementing intentionally toward building that bridge on the path to early retirement. The one thing about do-it-yourself investors is you actually can hire financial advisors who do not manage investments and do not sell any insurance products. It's very rare, but there are quite a handful at this point. They're called advice-only financial planners. In the show notes, if you'd like to include adviceonlynetwork.com is a way where you can find financial planners who will only provide advice, right? Including investment advice, but they won't ask to manage your money, and they won't sell you any insurance products. Just you pay for the advice and then you move on and implement your plan yourself.
So good. Jason, thoughts?
No, I think that's a good place to kind of wind it down. I like everything you said. Yeah. Any last thoughts for you, Paul or Cody? Anything you want to leave our listeners with before we head out on this episode?
Yeah, I will. I also mention that just because you're a do-it-yourself investor today doesn't mean you're always going to want to do it yourself, right? A lot of us can imagine, maybe even our own parents, right? They had the time, temperament, and talent to do their own financial planning and invest in their own investment management early on in life. But it's not just about age, but also like mental capacity and also just, even if you have the time, it doesn't mean you want to spend your time doing these things. So I will say that whether or not you manage your own investments or hire and delegate out some of those things, both of those routes can be valuable. So you can continue to manage your own investment implementation, or you can hire somebody, and there's nothing wrong with either option. They just serve different people differently.
Absolutely. And, I love what you said when you're talking about, you're thankful that we didn't talk about like what mutual fund to buy or what things to do. And really but it's sad because a lot of other things out there focus so heavily on that, which I think you would agree, like we have zero control of the outcomes of those things. Yes, we can choose to be aggressive or conservative or whatever else exists, but that's actually probably one of the lower abilities to control type of things. So no, I love that. And, with that, just Cody, thank you so much for your time. I know people found this valuable just because of just insights that you provided that were, I think, well beyond just FIRE thought process. But with that, listeners, if you have any questions, please don't forget to email us. We'd love to answer questions. And again, Cody, thank you so much. And hope you have a great day.
Absolutely. Thanks so much, you too.
The opinions and statements presented on this show are for general information only and are not intended to provide specific advice or recommendations. Never make any investment or financial decisions based on information offered on this show without first consulting your financial, legal, or tax advisor. All economic and performance information mentioned on the show is historical in nature and is not indicative of any future results. All indices mentioned on this show are unmanaged and cannot be invested in directly. All information is believed to be from reliable sources. However, we make no representation as to its completeness or accuracy. Lastly, all opinions expressed by Jason Katita, Paul McWilliams, and any guests on the show are solely their own opinions and do not reflect the opinions of or are endorsed by Toba Financial or Inspire Advisors. For Jason Katita, investment advisory services are offered through Toba Financial LLC, a registered investment advisor offering advisory services in the state of Hawaii and in other jurisdictions where exempt from registration. And for Paul McWilliams, investment advisory services are offered through Inspire Advisors LLC, a registered investment advisor with the SEC.